Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Liberty Man channel. I'm Libertas. Today, we're going to look at something that's kind of fun. It's one of those simple gems of truth that nobody really knows much about, if anything, but we're going to look at the perspective of what one man did and how the actions of that one guy changed the whole course of the war. Of the revolution, excuse me, the Revolutionary War. But anyway, we're going to go to share screen and we'll get right to it. In the Holy Bible, in the chapter of book of James, chapter 5, verse 16, it says, "The effectual fervent prayer of a righteous man availeth much." The effectual fervent prayer of a righteous man avails much. So we're going to look at one such man and what's recorded about one prayer that he made. You might notice this guy right here. This is George Washington. And this is a drawing called The Prayer at Valley Forge. You can see here the men around the campfire with their log huts, and Washington is in a glen of trees by himself, but it's in the dead of winter. Snow's on the ground. It's cold. But he's out here on his own at night praying. But the true story about this painting is not so much him. It's what's hidden in plain sight that people don't know about. Yeah, it's about Washington praying at Valley Forge, but he did that all the time. Why this one? Well, it has to do with this guy right here. This is the man named Isaac Potts. Isaac Potts was a Tory, and he was a friend, or what we call today a Quaker. They were actually on his land. Valley Forge was his land. Washington was renting the man's house, or house that Mr. Potts owned. And it used to be a big steel mill, a forge. But right before Washington went there in September of that year, the British pretty much burned it to the ground before they went into winter quarters in Philadelphia. Back here, though, they didn't mess with the mill that belonged to Isaac Potts, probably because Potts was a spy for them. But anyway, the Quakers were very pacifist. They didn't want to be involved in the fighting of the war. But this man just happened to be a pacifist, and he just happened to be wanting to know what this guy kept doing going out into the woods. And here is what's recorded in the official records of America. Give me a second to pull this up here. And this is from a book called The Christian Life and Character of the Civil Institutions of the United States. This is what's recorded in the official records. It says, one of the most hopeful and inspiring scenes of the revolution was to see this great hero, with the interest of a nation on his soul, retire for prayer unto the God in whom he trusted. The winter at Valley Forge witnessed the retirement of Washington daily to some secluded glen and surrounding forest for prayer. Though gloom covered his desponding country and army, yet a cloud of doubt seldom darkened the serene atmosphere of his hopes. He knew that the cause was just and holy, and his faith and confidence in God as a defender and helper of right, steady in their ministrations of divine vigor to his soul. While the American army was at Valley Forge, Isaac Potts strolled up a creek that ran through his farm and walked quietly through the woods. He heard the tones of a solemn voice and, looking round, saw Washington's horse tied to a sapling. In a thicket nearby was Washington on his knees in earnest prayer. Like Moses, Mr. Potts felt he was on holy ground and retired unobserved. He returned home and, on entering the room of his wife, burst into tears and informed her what he had seen and heard, and exclaimed, "If there is any one on earth whom the Lord will hearken to, it is George Washington. And I feel a presentiment that under such a commander, there can be no doubt of our eventually establishing our independence, and that God in his providence has willed it so." This is coming from a guy that was a Tory and was spying on Washington. Here's a poem that was written about this. "Oh, who shall know the might of the words that he uttered there? The fate of nations there was turned by the fervor of his prayer. But wouldst thou know his name? Who wandered there alone? Go read enrolled in heaven's archives the prayer of Washington." There's another record similar, and this is The Life of George Washington with Curious Anecdotes by Mason Locke Weems in 1837. Weems records it this way. In the winter of 77, while Washington with the American army lay encamped at Valley Forge, a certain good old friend of the respectable family in name of Potts, if I mistake not, had occasion to pass through the woods near headquarters. Treading in his way along the venerable grove, suddenly he heard the sound of a human voice, which as he advanced increased in his ear, and at length became like the voice of one speaking much in earnest. As he approached the spot with a cautious step, whom should he behold in a dark natural bower of ancient oaks, but the commander-in-chief of the American armies on his knees in prayer. Motionless with surprise, friend Potts continued on the place till the general, having ended his devotions, arose and with a countenance of angelic serenity retired to headquarters. Friend Potts then went home and said, on entering his parlor, called out to his wife, "Sarah, my dear Sarah, all's well, all's well. George Washington will yet prevail." "What's the matter, Isaac?" repaired C. "Thee seemed moved." "Well, if I seem moved, 'tis no more than what I really am." Remember, this guy was not in favor of the revolution. "I have this day seen what I never expected. Thee knows that I always thought that the sword and the gospel were utterly inconsistent, and that no man could be a soldier and a Christian at the same time. But George Washington has this day convinced me of my mistake." He then related what he had seen and concluded with this prophetical remark: "If George Washington be not a man of God, I am greatly deceived, and will and still more shall I be deceived if God do not through him work out a great salvation for America." One of the things that Washington was praying about here was that his soldiers were starving. They were at Valley Forge in one of the coldest winters that they had experienced in their lifetime. They were running out of food. The ground was marked with the blood of the men's feet being cut, walking on the ice without proper boots. And Isaac Potts, when he saw this and was convinced that George Washington was a man of God and that God was with him, then he knew that the American Revolution was going to be won by this man. So he went back and he told this story to all the Quakers in the area, and they got together and they fed the army at Valley Forge. So the effectual, fervent prayer of a righteous man just going about his daily prayers saved the army at Valley Forge, because this man here heard that prayer and told everybody about it. Now, this right here is something I think is really cool. This is a stained glass window in a room in the United States Capitol that I had the honor and the privilege to be invited to go into. I'd been invited up to Washington for a congressional pastor's briefing, and we had a guided tour in the middle of the night. And the whole Capitol was shut down except for us and the congressmen that were giving us the tour through the Capitol. But they allowed us to go in this room and see this. And so this is called Washington's Prayer, but it says, "Preserve me, O God, for in thee do I put my trust," Psalm 16:1. But you see here the great seal of the United States of America, with Annuit Coeptis and Novus Ordo Seclorum, with the pyramid and the Eye of Providence from where the children of Israel left Egypt. And then down here, we see the front of the Great Seal with E Pluribus Unum. And I did a teaching on that not too long ago. So go back and look at that teaching and find out what E Pluribus Unum means yourself. I don't want to do all the work for you. But anyway, this is a room that is set off from the Capitol chambers where the congressional members can go there and pray before they cast their votes or whenever they would like. And it was an absolute privilege to go in that room. So I wanted to share that with everybody today and let them know that the effectual, fervent prayer of one righteous man can save an army, can change the whole course of a war, can change the heart and mind of one man, who that man goes and tells another man, who goes and tells another man, who comes and tells another man. See how it works? So we never know where our prayers are going to go and who they're going to affect. But the effectual, fervent prayer of a single man is powerful. And don't forget that. That's the way our country was founded. Those are things that are made into monuments and paintings to record the history of our country. So hope you enjoyed it. God bless, and we'll see you next time.